always and forever.
But on the afternoon of February the 24th, 1979, tragedy struck this talented musician-composer. A devastating automobile accident left Johnny Wilder paralyzed and lying near death in a nearby Dayton hospital.
Johnny Wilder Jr. was not who we thought he was. From whispers of a violent temper behind closed doors to disturbing claims of emotional and physical abuse, the soulful frontman of HeatWave may have lived a double life.
And today, after years of constant therapy and his undying faith in God, Johnny Wilder has overcome almost impossible odds.
Some close to Wilder suggest he battled with anger, control, and drug addiction, all while keeping a gentle public persona.
After years of constant therapy and his undying faith in God, Johnny Wilder has overcome almost impossible odds.
Then came the tragic car accident that changed everything. Or did it? Some say it was karma. Others say it was a wake-up call. But could it have been something deeper? Let's delve in.
Always and forever.
Word on the street was that Johnny Wilder Jr., the smooth frontman from HeatWave, maybe wasn't quite as squeaky clean behind the scenes as everybody liked to believe when he was out here serenading crowds with Always and Forever, like it was his own personal love letter to humanity. Folks love to imagine him as this super sweet, soulful guy who was practically a walking Hallmark card, especially after that horrific car accident left him paralyzed from the neck down. That image of resilience and unshakable positivity became the headline story. But behind all the glossy magazine spreads and feel-good TV interviews, there'd been a steady stream of quiet buzz for ages that his private world was way more tangled up than he ever let on. Whispers floated around about fiery mood swings, messy fallouts, and rumors that maybe he was hiding parts of who he really was from everyone, even the people closest to him. Some folks who swore up and down they'd been tight with Johnny said he could flip the switch in an instant. One minute he'd be calm and charming, the next he'd be shooting tense glares across the room, or snapping at whoever happened to be in his path. A few even claimed he had a habit of icing people out, or getting borderline controlling if you were in his circle, and things didn't go the way he liked. Of course, none of this ever ended up in any official court documents or police files. No lawsuits, no restraining orders, nothing you could point to and say, yep, that's proof. And that's exactly why everyone kept side-eyeing the whole situation, guessing what was true and what was just gossip. Back then, the music industry had pretty much perfected the art of sweeping anything inconvenient right under the rug, especially if you were cranking out hit records that kept everybody's pockets lined. It was the same playbook that let Marvin Gaye's family drama stay buried under layers of polished PR.
Person, like, what could he have done that would have justified his father shooting him and killing him? I'll tell you what he did. He fucking outshone his father.
Yeah.
That's what he did.
And let Rick James run around wild for years. If you were topping charts like HeatWave, the labels would bend over backward to keep your reputation squeaky clean. Any talk about ugly arguments behind closed doors, wild partying, or relationships that turned sour could disappear overnight. Thanks to a well-timed payout, airtight contracts that shut people up, or just the right publicist making a call to tell the media to look the other way. So while Johnny's voice was out here melting hearts, there were always those lingering questions behind the curtain. Was he really the saint everyone thought he was? Or was there a lot more going on in the shadows that nobody ever dared to say out loud? Some folks who hung around those circles swore up and down that the hush-hush culture stretched way past the usual ego clashes and money fights. It even reached into the constant, totally unproven talk about Johnny's sexuality. For years, a bunch of longtime HeatWave fans and people claiming they'd been tight with the crew would keep murmuring that maybe, just maybe, Johnny was quietly wrestling with who he was. According to all that secondhand chatter, again, never once backed up by any actual credible source, those private struggles were supposedly part of what made his personal relationships feel tense, or why he'd sometimes come off icy or snap at people behind closed doors. But it wasn't just a Johnny thing. This was the kind of rumor mill that could eat up any artist if you were in the wrong place at the wrong time. Folks who really knew how the music machine operated back then said that even a whisper that a big black male star might not be straight could send entire record labels into total meltdown mode. These companies were dead set on crafting this bulletproof image of their artists as ultra-masculine, smooth-talking ladies' men. Because that's what they thought would keep radio programmers happy, suburban moms spending money, and the whole marketing machine humming along without a hiccup. It wasn't exactly some rare phenomenon either. Labels would work overtime scrubbing away any detail that didn't match the glossy fantasy they were selling to the public. They'd throw money at publicists to kill stories, shuffle people out of interviews, or just lean on the fact that back then, journalists were a lot more likely to look the other way if it meant keeping their access. Just look at Luther Vandross, who spent his entire career dodging relentless speculation, while his team never let so much as a syllable slip out. Or Freddie Mercury. Pretty much everyone in the business had known the truth about his private life years before any reporter dared to put it in print. The same playbook got pulled out any time the rumor mill started churning. Deny everything. Distract the press with a new single. And if that didn't work, make sure there was no paper trail and nobody willing to go on record. So when it came to Johnny, even though all that talk about his sexuality was just unverified hearsay, it was exactly the kind of buzz the industry was hell-bent on keeping buried. Because if it ever got traction, it could have cracked the shiny image they'd worked so hard to build around him.
Happiness, togetherness, lovingness.
Some people always felt that if even a scrap of the talk about Johnny was real, the game plan would have stayed the same. Shut it down fast, bury it deep, and never let anything mess with the image. Mix in the random gossip about partying too hard or spiraling behind closed doors. Again, never backed up by arrests or anything official. And it turned into this blurry picture of an artist everyone kept guessing about. Mostly because nobody ever put anything on record. Then there was Johnny's accident.
But on the afternoon of February the 24th, 1979, tragedy struck this talented musician-composer. A devastating automobile accident left Johnny Wilder paralyzed and lying near death in a nearby Dayton hospital.
And today,
The official story painted it as a horrible twist of fate that left him paralyzed. But if you listen to the old tour crew swapping stories after too many drinks, a different idea floated around sometimes. Those whispers claimed maybe it wasn't just bad luck, that maybe a heated argument or the stress of pretending to be someone he wasn't could have played a part in what happened. No credible reporter ever proved any of it. No police files ever linked the crash to reckless choices. No real proof ever showed up. Still, the fact that people kept repeating that theory for years said a lot about how the neat version of events always felt a little too neat for some.
after years of constant therapy and his undying faith in God, Johnny Wilder has overcome almost impossible odds.
When Johnny made it through that nightmare, he pulled off what a lot of people thought was a pretty jaw-dropping switch-up. Practically overnight, he went from disco and R&B star, someone who, depending who you asked, had a bit of a reputation for drama, to a gospel singer pouring his whole identity into faith and fresh starts.
And in 1987, Johnny has just completed his first solo album, a unique collection of inspirational music performed entirely by Johnny himself.
Folks believed it came from a real place, like he'd lost so much that leaning into spirituality was the only way to keep going. But others saw it as classic damage control. Flood the headlines with a feel-good redemption story before anyone dug deeper into old rumors. It wasn't exactly a new move. Al Green turned preacher after his own messy chapters, and Little Richard kept ditching his rock persona whenever things got too messy. In those stories, religion doubled as both protection and PR. No one wants to poke at someone preaching about grace. With Johnny, even some music business vets speaking off the record, admitted the timing made them squint a little. The second he went full gospel, all the talk about his temper and whispers about who he really was behind closed doors seemed to vanish. Because honestly, who was going to stand up and question a paralyzed musician singing about faith and redemption?
I confess to, I feel somewhat.
There was definitely another way to look at all this. A lot of people who'd actually spent real time around Johnny always said the darker takes were just unfair. They painted him as someone who really did change for good. A man who got hit with something unthinkable and came out the other side with a new sense of purpose. They'd argue that if any of those stories about drugs, bad behavior, or hidden parts of his life were actually true, something solid would have shown up eventually. And the truth was, nobody with real credibility ever confirmed any of it. But these days, even old rumors can pop back up and mess with how people remember famous faces. Some fans started rethinking it all, wondering if the gospel records were purely spiritual or also a smart way to clear his image. Still, for all the late-night debates and side comments, none of it ever stepped out of the rumor mill. You wouldn't find any real evidence, no legal files, no respected reporter who locked it down as fact. Whether those stories were just jealousy, projection, or people needing something to gossip about, or if they hinted at something deeper the industry never wanted out, no one could really say. What everyone could agree on was this. Like a lot of stars from that era, Johnny's story sat in that weird spot between legend and whispers, the shiny version out front for the world to see, and the other version lingering quietly in the background, never fully proven and never completely fading away.
Always and forever.
Johnny started out as an American serviceman chilling over in West Germany when he first jumped into performing. Even while he was still rocking that uniform, he was hitting up bars and clubs, singing with all sorts of bands. When he finally wrapped up his time in the army, he just stayed in Germany instead of heading home. After a while, he decided to make the move to the UK. He threw an ad in a local paper, and that's how he linked up with Rod Temperton, a songwriter and keyboard player who'd end up shaping the whole heatwave sound. They spent the mid-70s running through London's nightclub scene under the name Chicago's Heatwave, testing out their music and blending funk with disco until it stuck. But Johnny felt like the vocals needed more punch, so he called his brother Keith Wilder, who was playing in a band back in Dayton, to come join him. The group eventually locked in a deal with GTO Records, while Epic handled their stuff in the States. In the studio, they teamed up with Barry Blue and Jesse Witten to start cooking up their debut album. Not long after, Jesse was replaced by Roy Carter after Jesse was tragically killed in a stabbing. By the time they dropped their first album, Too Hot to Handle, things were already heating up. Their single Boogie Nights shot up to number 2 in the UK and later did the same in the US. It even went platinum. The album itself made a splash on the charts, and their smooth ballad Always and Forever became another hit, pulling in a platinum certification too. Heatwave had officially arrived, and everyone was paying attention. Heatwave kept the momentum going with Barry Blue still handling production, and they dropped their second album, Central Heating. The lead track, The Groove Line, blew up and climbed into the top 10 in the US. It went platinum too, proving the group wasn't just a one-album wonder.
Happiness, togetherness, lovingness, foreverness.
But by the late 70s, things inside the band were getting pretty messy. First, Eric Johns walked out, so they brought in Billy Jones to take over guitar duties. Not long after, Rod Temperton also decided to bounce. Even though Rod kept writing songs for Heatwave up until the early 80s, he got way more famous for cooking up hits for everybody else. He started handing out award-winning tracks to big names like Rufus, the Brothers Johnson, George Benson, and even Herbie Hancock and Quincy Jones. But his biggest flex was working with Michael Jackson, writing 3 songs for both Off the Wall and Thriller, including the ones that named the albums. Just when it seemed like the band was ready to get back in the studio, things took a truly shocking turn. Mario Mantis showed up at a party at Elton John's place in London with his girlfriend. She decided to leave early for reasons nobody ever really pinned down. When Mario got home, she was furious about something and ended up stabbing him in the chest. The knife went straight into his heart, and he was technically dead for a few minutes. After months in a coma, he woke up unable to see, speak, or move. To this day, he couldn't remember any of it. In a twist that stunned everyone, he didn't press charges and even moved back in with her after leaving the hospital. The band had to keep going, so they replaced Mario with Derek Bramble on bass and brought in Calvin Duke on keys. With a new producer, Phil Ramone, they finished Hot Property, proving they weren't done yet, no matter how many hurdles popped up. Around this stretch, HeatWave recorded Keep Tomorrow for Me, which played over the credits of the action comedy Escape to Athena. Barry Blue handled the music, and Rod Temperton wrote the lyrics, with a little extra orchestration from Christodoulis. Some fans thought it was one of their best tracks ever, but hardly anybody got to hear it because the rights were tangled up with Lou Grade's company, ITC Entertainment. The movie tanked at the box office, and the soundtrack plans got scrapped everywhere except Japan, where the song came out on vinyl under the film's Japanese title, Offside 7. Then everything changed when Johnny had that terrible car crash. He made it through, but the accident left him paralyzed from the neck down. He couldn't perform on stage anymore, though he kept recording vocals in the studio and stayed on as co-producer with Barry. HeatWave still kept pushing forward. They put together the Candles album, with Rod stepping in once again to write most of the tracks. The one exception was All I Am, written by Lindsay DePaul. She used to be Barry's songwriting partner, and Johnny personally asked her to contribute something. They also brought in James Dean Nicholas, who eventually joined the Commodores, to help out with lead vocals in the studio and cover live shows. HeatWave dropped their single Gangsters of the Groove, and it turned into a pretty big hit, landing at number 21 on the US R&B chart. But thanks to everybody suddenly hating disco, it didn't crack the main Hot 100. Over in the UK, though, it climbed to number 19 a little later. The album itself didn't really catch fire, peaking at 71 in the States. Their 1982 album Current kicked off another round of changes. They teamed back up with Barry Blue to produce, but the record only reached number 156 on the Billboard 200, even though it still did all right on the R&B side. One of Rod Temperton's songs, Lettin' It Loose, got a little attention that summer, but nothing massive. By the end of the year, Derek Bramble decided he was done and left to focus on producing. He later teamed up with David Bowie and also played a huge part in launching Jakey Graham's career. Around the same time, James Dean Nicholas took off too. He'd been singing with HeatWave but eventually stepped in to replace Lionel Richie as the frontman of the Commodores. After HeatWave pretty much went quiet in the early 80s, they eventually came back together a few years later with a lineup that looked totally different. In 1988, they put out an album called The Fire. But this was nothing like the old days. Keith was the only original member still around. Billy Jones, who'd first hopped on board back in the late 70s, showed up again to play guitar, but most of the familiar faces were missing. The Fire tried to bring some buzz back to the HeatWave name, but that same year, the Wilder brothers were also doing their own thing. Johnny dropped a solo gospel album called My Goal, which made it super clear he was all about faith and uplifting messages by then. Meanwhile, Keith kept steering the band in their classic R&B lane. Even though they were heading in different directions, the brothers circled back to work together not long after. In 1989, they teamed up to record a gospel project called Sound of Soul. It meant a lot to them personally, but none of those late 80s albums, The Fire, My Goal, or Sound of Soul ended up making much noise on the charts. HeatWave's name got an unexpected boost in the early 90s when a remix of Mind-Blowing Decisions climbed the charts in the UK. All of a sudden, people were digging back into their old hits again. Meanwhile, through the mid and late 80s, the lineup kept shifting around. Keith was still holding it down, this time with bassist Dave Williamson and singer Donovan Blackwood stepping in. It was another version of the band, and it set the stage for even more changes. In the 90s, Keith pulled together yet another round of new faces to keep HeatWave going strong. The group now had keyboardists Kevin Sutherland and Byron Bird, plus guitarist Bill Jones back in the fold, and original drummer Ernest Berger holding it down on the kit. They kicked off a tour across the US to prove the songs still had fans. One of the big moments was a live show at the Greek Theater in Hollywood, which they recorded and put out as a live album in 1997. Years later, Johnny passed away peacefully in his sleep at home in Dayton, closing the chapter on an unforgettable voice that had shaped so much of HeatWave's story. Not too long after, another huge part of HeatWave's story was gone. Word came out that Rod Temperton, the band's original keyboard wizard and songwriter, had passed in London after what his team called a short, aggressive fight with cancer. They never shared the exact date he died, and by the time people heard about it, the funeral was already over. Keith, who had kept the HeatWave name alive through all those different eras, was born Keith Edward Wilder in Dayton, Ohio. He passed away in 2017 at 65. More recently, in 2024, drummer Ernest Berger, who everyone called Bilbo, died from a heart attack at 73. After he was gone, Mario Mantis was the only original HeatWave member still here to carry the memories of how it all started.